Do you see this being used? Do you think it's headed in this direction where it makes sense to me? I mean, yeah, C. diff for sure, maybe ulcerative colitis, but just almost anyone who's got really severe gut dysbiosis. I mean, in my Facebook group, we have 22,000 women in there now with, it's called the estrogen dominant support group. And you can imagine how many of us are in there complaining about things. And, there's so much like malabsorption and so much SIBO. And I mean, it's just so rampant. And also anxiety disorders and depression and suicidal ideation and all of that stuff. And I'm like, gosh, I crossed my mind before where it's like I could see this just being a cure for a lot of things where you just, do you see it that being that way, or it would take an awful long time to where it's like prescribed by a doctor for just about any gut related disorder, which is
Yeah, I
everywhere.
think I think we're getting to the point where we're appreciating its abilities.
Mm,
I think the growth in clinical trials in the last 5, 10 years, going from having like 30 to 300, is
wow.
huge. The number of diseases that it's being looked at are really important, and we're starting to see that it plays a role. But it's not so clear cut because it won't work for everything and it won't work for everybody.
Hmm.
So how do we screen for that?
Hmm.
And we're talking about GI based issues. If you're talking about things like irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease, um, that has an inflammatory process within it. So you have inflamed states and non-inflamed states.
Mm,
Okay, so does treating in a non-inflamed versus an inflamed state, do you get the same outcomes? And so that's the nitty gritty we have to understand before it can be applied to different things. Is
mhm,
that okay? So like, when does it work best? What states does it have to be in for really to see changes?
mhm,
I think there are some areas where the current research that's there, and I think the research that's coming is astounding. One of those areas is with children with ASD,
mm,
and I think we're going to see more and more, even in Parkinson's disease. There's a handful of clinical trials that are happening right now that I think are really well laid out.
mhm,
And the initial work that's been done, not only do we see GI improvements, but we see improvements in, outward based Parkinson's behaviors, or in ASD changes in ASD behaviors. So we're like, okay, so the gut change seems to lead to other changes. Okay, so like, how do we understand that and see that consistently? And I
mhm,
think that's where we're at now. It's like, okay, let's do the work. Let's get a better understanding. Let's see what the outcomes are,
mhm,
how consistent they are. Okay, then where can we apply them? There's more buy-in from larger pharma companies,
mhm,
which I think is really important because clinical trials aren't cheap. And the number of disorders that have been linked to gut dysfunction is long. So
mm,
how do we best tackle that? And I think as we get more buy-in from kind of larger pharma and society as a larger pact, is like, okay, so like this is important. And while I think one of the holdups with FMT has been that it does require stool transfer,
mm,
while it's purified and it's not, it's not what you would consider, stool, that's where it is at its base, and that's something that people, and I think in general, we have to get past.
yeah.
And I think that's where we're headed. I think people are appreciating that their gut is important, and with that are appreciating that these bacteria are important, and that being able to transfer healthy bacteria to someone that doesn't have them has
Mhm,
huge impacts. And I think that's where we're going, and I think that understanding is going to grow quickly. And I think the number of clinical trials shows you that there's buy-in,
mhm,
because to get it out of the lab and into the clinic is a huge step, and we're seeing that. So I think we're on the pathway to seeing this kind of as having
mhm,
a larger acceptance.